Hi everyone, this is Sinette, and in this video we are continuing with parenting and tantrums. So in the previous video we had a look at the past, the present and the future relationships, alright? Especially how your coping mechanisms, which is the parent's behavioral pattern, in the present in reaction to your child's tantrums, right, is actually keeping this cycle and this relationship of the child throwing tantrums exactly the same day in and day out, right? So what is the importance of the parent standing as a living example for the child? I mean, here, let's have a look again at you as parent, and this is your child, all right? So your child developed the behavioral pattern of throwing tantrums, which is their way of communicating their emotions to you as parent. So that was their initial behavioral pattern. Now, the parent's behavioral pattern, right, was to create coping mechanisms day in and day out as a reaction to the tantrum throwing, right? Now, what is really unfolding here in this moment is a form of communication, okay? A communication as in the child is saying something through the tantrum, the parent saying something back. I mean, if you have a look at you as parent as well, in terms of your normal relationships with other people, when you start to engage in a conversation, you know, someone says something in a certain way or a specific way or a topic, and you will accordingly respond back or you will react. There's always routine or habitual ways of even communicating. So, and that's in verbal communication. Now, the same happens within body language, physical communication, such moments where it's more about a reaction that happens between parent and child. So now what's going to be busy happening, and what we had discussed in the previous video and other videos as well, is you as parent taking responsibility and changing your behavioral pattern, your way of communicating within this moment. Because the moment you as parent, right, change the way you are communicating with your child, I mean, your child has to then change the way they are communicating with you, because this behavioral pattern linkage was almost like a form of an agreement that was made between you and your child. If I throw a tantrum, this is how you're going to react or respond. But now you as parent are going, no, I'm not responding or reacting like this anymore. I'm now communicating with you this way. All right. And it's interesting because, I mean, for the child, initially, it's going to be kind of like feeling like there's a friction happening inside them, because now you as parent are changing and they don't know completely what to do with it, okay? Sometimes it may lead to them throwing their tantrums even more to almost try and get you back to that behavioral pattern that supported their tantrum, okay? Until eventually they'll start going, okay, this is not working anymore. I have to change, right? So here, in having a look at this play out that happens, I mean, it's something that's quite fascinating, because this that's happening between you and your child actually first starts happening inside of you as parent. How does that work? Because if you have a look, you can, for example, say, let's take a look at you as parent over here. Let's say your coping mechanism starts coming up, okay? It's your coping mechanism. Let's say that your coping mechanism was usually just to walk away and ignore them, but the walking away with like an emotional energy, you know. Now this time you started practicing, right, the breathing, not going into the coping mechanism, but instead communicating with your child. You know, speaking very direct, very stable, very straightforward. You know, informing them why they can't have something or why they can't do something, explaining it to them in a lot of detail, right, so that there's understanding that's transferred into your child. Even though they might be continuing throwing that tantrum, you remain clear and stable in your communication with them, all right? Now, this coping mechanism inside yourself is going to be like a little tantrum that wants to keep coming up and keep coming up. But you have to stand inside yourself and say, no, I've decided to change. I'm not going to let this coping mechanism in this moment take over, because I know that if I'm going to go into this coping mechanism, it's not going to change me. It's not going to change this moment with my child. So you breathe, you stand, you just keep on explaining the situation to your child. All right, even though they're throwing the tantrum, it's the same as what's going on inside yourself. Even though that coping mechanism might want to come up, you stand your ground. Right? Same with your child. Throwing the tantrum, you stand your ground until slowly but surely, each and every single present day, you commit to assisting and supporting yourself in that moment to change. The change will slowly but surely come through, where eventually your coping mechanisms will not be coming up anymore, because you're now really in the moment changing. So the coping mechanisms will start kind of dying out inside yourself, if you will, because they only always kept coming up with such strong force because it's the only way you knew how to handle that moment or how to deal with it. But now you've got a new way, okay? The same will happen with your child in that moment, right? Because they're going to be throwing the tantrum, but with you standing your ground and you remaining consistent in just standing there and explaining the situation to them as it is, not making it more or less, just, child, this is how it is, this is why, this is the reasons, this is what you need to understand. Again, slowly but surely, their behavioral pattern, their tantrum throwing, right, will start changing, because you're showing them something new. You're showing them a new way of looking at something, a new way of approaching something. And the child will then equally start getting out of this behavioral pattern and start seeing the change, and then again responding to you, right? So it's like changing the dynamics of response. Have a look. Initially, your child threw the tantrum first, to which you as parent responded or reacted, okay? But now, you as parent are changing your response or reaction, which will mean that, in turn, your child will change their response or reaction. So it is quite fascinating in how this particular dynamic between two people can be applied also anywhere else in your life. I mean, have a look at where there's even another person in your world where they came at you with, let's say, like a lot of stress, all right? And you would usually react to that as just not wanting to be close to them. But now you now realize, okay, I reacted to their behavior. So how will me changing my behavior toward them support them in some way? So then you, for example, go, okay, they're very stressed. How about I take the more calm approach? You know, resonate a calmness within me and my voice, not resist them, but actually be in their space and show them and be a leading example of calmness. You know, how that again would be more supportive for that individual. Okay, and the same moment happens here between you and your child. It's all about your leading example, your behavioral patterns, your presence within it all that will determine the outcome of a moment. All right, so for this video, just explaining how this process unfolds in the relationship between you as parent and the child, and to remember to every single present day keep consistent and remind yourself that you're busy changing the future every opportunity you have to stand your ground. And what we'd also suggest practicing for this video is when your child is throwing that tantrum, right, you keep on simply explaining to them the situation, sharing with them the reasons why a decision was made, why something could happen or couldn't happen. I mean, that is also an important starting point of developing a good communication with your child, because now they can start seeing that, you know, you're sharing everything with them so that they can have a nice, tangible, practical understanding of why something can be done or cannot be done. And the more you practice that level of communication again, as a leading example, your child will notice. I mean, children learn through copying, through imitating, through leading living examples. So this can then also in turn allow your child to realize, okay, look, I don't need to throw the tantrums anymore. I can just communicate with my parents, talk to them about things, share with them what I'm experiencing, so that they don't have to go to the extremes of throwing tantrums or sulking, when they don't get their way or when they don't agree, but that there is that level of trust, stability, and intimacy between the two of you that you can communicate with one another through words, through connecting with one another rather than through coping mechanisms and behavioral patterns. All right, we'll go to here for this video. Thank you very much.